Please welcome Aman Raheja.
Good. Wow. Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be here, especially on the last day. So I'm actually very pleased. We were having a discussion on how many people will show up, so really appreciate the crowd here. We're really hoping to have a great discussion and share some really interesting thoughts with you. So just by the way of introduction, I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for HPE. From a background standpoint, I've spent a lot of years in financial services and healthcare, so a bunch of other industries. So a lot of times I'm asking questions or talking to these gentlemen from the perspective of an outsider still, because I've been here about 6 months with HPE. And given that HPE uses its own technology from a security standpoint, I do have questions oftentimes that says, okay, so how are we really protecting these technologies? How are we making sure that there's adequate security built into it? So really pleased to have the panel here, and I'm going to allow them a quick 30 seconds to introduce themselves, starting with John. So John,
yeah,
go ahead,
thanks,
please.
John Green. I'm the CTO and the Chief Security Officer for the Aruba Networking Division of HPE. That was a great picture of me, but it was about 15 years old. I had a lot less gray hair back then, so that was nice. Been with Aruba for 22 years now.
My name is Nigel Edwards. I joined what was then Hewlett-Packard Labs 37 years ago, and for the last 30 years, I've been working on various security technologies. Currently the director of the security lab in what is HPE Labs, where we work on trusted execution environments, confidential computing, post-quantum cryptography, supply chain security, and provide subject matter expertise across the business units.
Good morning, everyone. Alex Luprinsky. I am the chief technologist in the HP storage. Joined HP about 8 years ago. Before that, I had an embarrassingly long stint at different storage companies, including EMC and some telecom before that. So storage is a very interesting topic for security because it houses the user data, but at the same time, I think the least amount of effort is spent on securing the actual storage systems. There will be some wonderful topics covered here today.
Okay, last one, Jan de Klerk. I work for Advisory and Professional Services. I'm leading the integrated cybersecurity services. So we basically make sure that the security is embedded in all the services that we deliver to our customers. I've been in the company since the digital days, if you remember that, the company, 28 years. And I'm based in Belgium.
Awesome. Hey, thank you, everyone. Really glad to have you all. So let me start with a little bit context on what we're going to focus on. So as a CISO, and I think most of you in your organizations would worry about, are we doing the basics right to start with, from identity to vulnerability management to governance and risk? We also have to think about, okay, what are we really trying to protect in each of our organizations? You know, like Alex mentioned, data is one example, but there's various aspects from a threat surface standpoint that you need to protect against, your networks as an example. And then most importantly, threat landscape keeps changing on us. So now we're worrying about AI and the implications of that from a security standpoint. And there's always this debate about how much should we invest in detecting threats and vulnerabilities versus what should we do on the prevention side. And there's a very important balance that we all need to strike. So I'm going to start with a question to all of you on the panel on what your thoughts are about how should people think about detection versus prevention and how do you strike that balance? Starting with you, John.
Yeah, I think that we underinvest in prevention generally. I think that we get all kind of excited by the flashy toys at some of the trade shows, especially Black Hat and RSA and things like this, that can do a lot of detection, automate response, correlate, who's doing it to me and why are they doing it, all these sorts of things. And they forget about the prevention aspect of it. So phishing is a great example. I would like it so that if I click the phishing link, nothing bad happens, right? And so we tend to think too little about that. So I think we underinvest in prevention. Detection, obviously, we still have, not everything is going to be 100% effective, so we still have to have it. But I think we need to do better on that first pillar.
Nigel?
Yeah, so I think it's really important that we get the fundamentals of our switches and our storage arrays and our servers, that they provide a trustworthy foundation. And I think we often forget just how much has to happen before these devices can actually do useful work. So if you take a modern server, it's loading a dozen or more separate firmware modules into things simple as the power supply, the IO management controller, but then the storage controller, the network controller, and indeed the processor itself. And all of these are potentially attack vectors. If an attacker could inject their own firmware, that the damage they could do could range from just bricking the system through to having total control and being able to spy and exfiltrate data at the very lowest levels. So we spend a lot of time making sure that the chain of trust is secure, but we need to do more. The network controllers and storage controllers are becoming, in their own right, fairly complex computers. And so that's why we were one of the prime movers in the SPDM, the Security Protocol and Data Model standard, which enables these devices to cryptographically authenticate themselves and also test their own state so we can see what firmware is running in them, and then it's the correct firmware.
Alex?
Yeah, thank you. So basically agree with everything that was said. In securing a control plane, so to speak, an ability to access, control, modify, provision parts of your IT chain is extremely important, and the folks before me know way more about it than I do. The one twist that I would like to offer as a storage professional is that there is a very popular misconception that the storage data path is generally a high trust data path. People try very, very hard to secure the control plane. Basically, you shall not be permitted to log into your storage array and change the configuration. Granted. And you will employ lots of different techniques that we'll be talking about. Prevention is important in that area. However, the storage data plane uses technologies like RDMA that basically make a part of your server memory available for direct access, and there's very, very little effort spent in securing those particular paths, because performance is paramount and security often affects performance. So I think paying attention to the data path is no less important in both detection and prevention, and we in storage actually spend an inordinate amount of time to try to make sure that those are secure. Those are often overlooked. I just wanted to make this point.
Jan, what are you advising?
Well, I think I want to broaden the discussion a bit. I think we are a technology company. I think when we talk about detection and protection, we are maybe overemphasizing a bit too much the technology part. I think it's equally important to take a holistic approach on the detection and the protection level. So also look at people controls that you need, process controls, make sure that you have properly trained people, that you do security awareness campaigns, that you have the right processes, policies, procedures in place. And I think it's very important today with the growing emphasis on cyber resilience. So cyber resilience definitely can not only be covered by tools, by technical tools. You need to have a very holistic program in place to make sure that you can withstand and recover from all kinds of adverse conditions that can happen against your IT.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and also kind of piggybacks on what all of you have shared, which is there's no one answer, right? You have to have a good balance of different processes, people, technologies, work together and figure out how do you really synchronize any of that to really protect your organization. So that's amazing. One of the things that I think you've all heard, and I'm going to start with John here, is about zero trust. Right? The one thing I find really interesting in all these years, and the concept's been out there now for almost 15 years, everyone has a different definition what it means. And it's actually appropriate because it can vary depending on an organization, your architecture, your own networking and data or intellectual property or resilience, or if you're manufacturing, you could be prioritizing different things when it comes to zero trust. So what I'm going to start with is, John, because Aruba focuses quite a bit on it, is how do you define it and how would you advise people to think about it?
Yeah, I go back to kind of the 2008 Forrester definition of zero trust. And that kind of emerged. That wasn't a new creation. That emerged out of some work, like in the Jericho Forum. They called it deperimeterization, and that word was too difficult to say, and so zero trust ended up being the thing that we said. But really the point was the perimeter was disappearing, and mobility was a factor in that, and lots of different factors in that, but the rise of the internet and so forth. Let me give you the anti-definition. So when I started with Aruba in 2003, our bug database that we used for R&D was just on the network. It was Bugzilla, it was free, right? And if you were on our internal network in our office, you could access that. You didn't have to provide credentials. You could read anything in that database. You could write anything to it. That's the anti-zero trust, and a lot of things used to be that way, where if you're on the intranet, if we can call it that, you have access rights that you don't have if you're sitting on the outside. And then the job was, if I leave the building, I need something like VPN to bring me back into the intranet so that I can get that access. And that's the anti-pattern of zero trust. So my definition of zero trust is really presence on a particular network segment doesn't give you access to anything on its own. I try to keep it that simple.
All right, great. Jan, why don't we go to you? From how are you advising people to switch from their current network capabilities to rethink, and how should they migrate to the new model?
So yeah, on the zero trust level, I think the definition was already given. The definition that we always use is never trust, always verify. And I think the important thing that we do in service when we talk about zero trust, I think it's perhaps the most important architectural principle that's around in security today. So you need to try to honor it all the time across the board. So I think it's not only about ZTNA, zero trust network access. It's a very important access, but you can also apply it to compute. Remember all the great stuff that we did in HP on the TPM, the silicon root of trust, so the trust anchor in the hardware. You can also do it in storage, and I'm sure Alex can talk about that. But you can also do it on the app level, make sure that you have a secure SDLC. You can even do it on the device level, and last but not least, you have to do it on the identity level. So I think identity is a very important, it's one of the cornerstones of security. So it's also an area where you need to apply zero trust. And also when you do a zero trust project, I agree it's important, but I don't be over ambitious, don't try to boil the ocean, know where your weakest points are, and try to focus there, try to identify some quick wins. I think that's a good way to embark on zero trust.
Excellent. Alex or Nigel, anything you would like to add?
Yeah, so I don't want to be the troublemaker, but it seems like the lower part of the infrastructure is usually the most troublesome one. So zero trust and verify, I like it very much because that's the motto where we all should be going. And actually it should be less and less trust and more verify, because the attacks are getting to be more and more sophisticated. The challenge that I would like to put to the audience here, that sometimes zero trust always costs. Nothing is ever free. And there is a glaring example in the storage industry. Zero trust usually means that your data needs to be encrypted end to end. In fact, some federal regulations require it to be encrypted. So it gets encrypted at the server, it gets stored in your storage system, encrypted. The problem with that approach is that when you store something encrypted, you basically nullify your ability to reduce the data prior to storage, duplicate, compress, thus having to pay more for storage. And guess what? Customers don't want to pay more. So there are all sorts of different loopholes. In fact, there's an industry established practice where a server and the storage system actually share the encryption key for the data that's supposed to be encrypted end to end, so the storage system can decrypt the data, deduplicate, compress, then store it encrypted somewhere else. So that essentially makes your storage system to be the weak point, because there's an amount of time where the data exists there unencrypted. Makes it very, very vulnerable to the attack, but some people just don't realize this. Securing end-to-end zero trust has a cost, and that cost needs to be paid.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to, I think, certainly echo what's already been said. I think verification is key. So to me, zero trust means authenticate, measure, and verify. And I think the industry needs to do more and improve how we actually measure and verify. So I mentioned SPDM, and devices which are using SPDM are just becoming available as a start to better measure the state of these very complex components that we have in our devices now. Since this is a panel where we're talking about some of the things we already have available that can help, I think it's worth pointing out that we have now for a few years been issuing cryptographic identifiers called IDEV IDs, which are industry standard, IEEE standard identities to our storage arrays, our switches and our servers. We use those for onboarding in the Green Lake. They enable you to identify securely the device throughout its operational life. In our servers, we issue platform certificates in the factory, which enable you to detect tampering of hardware on the way from the factory to you. And if you go look at, I think it's demo 713, just down the hall here on the right-hand side, which is about HPE ILO, you can see some of the work we've been doing on rendering more and more of the system state through the ILO Redfish API. So Redfish is an industry standard API. So you can see, for example, the full hardware inventory and use that to track the hardware inventory over the life of the system. We also have some technology previews there where we're testing the internal state of the system. You can look at the UEFI logs, the boot configuration, information from the TPM as well, and using ILO to monitor the HP VM Essentials hypervisor for detecting tampering. So this is something we continue to invest in. There's already, with platform certificates and IDEV IDs, things that are out that we have available.
That's great. So I think great points. Some of the really interesting takeaways all the way from do you understand the definition and what are you trying to get out of it, to trust and verify, to understanding the cost of what you're doing, to embedding very early into the system so that you can get the right protections in place. Because oftentimes, when I'm thinking about security, every time, and by the way, this is a crowd that probably understands this piece more than I would need to say, is bolting on security is always more expensive, right? So what can you do by design to help from that standpoint? One of the things that HPE did, and I'm going to, Nigel, go to you, is sign the CISA Secure by Design pledge. So would you take a minute to first help everyone understand what it is, why we signed it, and then help us understand where we are on the journey?
Sure. So CISA, the US Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, announced their Secure by Design pledge at the RSA conference in 2024. And HPE was one of the 50 or so companies that originally took the pledge, and Fidelma Russo, our CTO, committed us to the pledge. Fundamentally, it's the right thing to do. It's about being a force for good. It's about improving cyber security. If you look at the details of the pledge, there are two main components. One is to commit to driving the 7 principles or goals of Secure by Design across your product portfolio. So these are things like support for multi-factor authentication, no default passwords, committing to work with ethical hackers and security researchers, making patches available in a timely fashion. The second part of the pledge was to commit within 12 months to explain to the world how you do this, so that we could all learn from each other and improve cybersecurity in the industry in general. So just around the time of RSA 2025, Fidelma published a blog announcing our technical paper, which we have available, which explains how we drive these 7 goals or principles of secure by design. And if you look at that paper, one of the things I think jumps out is it's a lot of what we have is actually about the processes we have in place. So we have a product security council which consists of the senior security architects from all of the business units, from cybersecurity, from supply chain, that meet every week, where they're scanning the threat horizon, discussing new security technologies, and agreeing requirements that need to be adopted by our products. And then we have a product security office which audits the products against these requirements. So that's how we drive the 7 goals of CISA, Secure by Design, and indeed other security principles across all our business units and all our products.
That's great. Thank you, Nigel. So Alex, how do you make sure that's part of your products? Secure by Design.
So again, in that sense, we are basically following the lead of the security part of HP. Like, that's the benefit of being part of a very large company, and there are security specialists there. So traditionally, storage was focusing on preventing data loss and was less focusing on securing access to the data in the storage. It was always assumed that if you cannot access the storage array, you cannot access the data. Now this is actually changing now, and with Nigel's help and with the security organizational help, we're introducing design concepts into the storage array to basically sign and certify that the hardware that was delivered is the correct hardware. We are introducing concepts around configuration and setup that are not relying on user input, which can be falsified, but instead relying on industry definitions like IDEV-ID and LDEV-ID, which is actually cryptographically secure and can be associated with a particular hardware. So yes, it's baby steps for storage, but those are important baby steps that we're undertaking now.
Yeah. So John, anything you'd like to add? How you do that?
Don't trust developers, and I'm gonna apply.
No offense to anyone.
No, but I'm gonna apply a literal definition of zero trust to this. Everything Nigel mentioned about product security office and product security standards, we have all these great things, and this is what you're required to do, and there's SharePoint sites that give you all the instructions of what you have to do, and developers just don't do it. And every week I find out places that they took shortcuts and said, I got to get the product released. Here's what I'm gonna. We'll just comment this part out. That we've had to put automated systems in place to basically do security audits of our source code and our build process and our QA process and development process, so that I can have a team that can look at that and say, yeah, they're doing their job, or something's wrong here. And so I hate to put it that way, but developers of IT products are always. And it's not always their fault, right? That we have a continuous sort of cycle of senior people retiring, new people coming in who just don't know any better until they've kind of gone through their first round of critical security vulnerability. And so the learning process there is a bit tough. But so I don't want to imply that it's all intentional or negligent, but as long as we have kind of complicated software, I think we're going to continue to have problems, and all the standards in the world don't help if the developers don't understand those standards. So we focus a lot on sort of that far left side of the development cycle, and getting developers trained, and then auditing them and trying to make sure they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, I think. So by the way, what you're saying, I'm interpreting that as trust by.
Yes.
But verify, right? It goes back to the same concept. At the same time, we have to be vigilant in all phases of the the development process itself from a security standpoint, because attackers are looking for vulnerabilities, the smallest of the possibilities, and as they say, we have to be right every time. They have to be right once, right? So it's an important concept that we have adopted as an organization and made a pledge to, and make sure we're doing it. So Jan, I'm curious, when you're talking to customers, what are you hearing expectations on Secure by Design?
Well, I think when we talk about Secure by Design in cyber services, I think we definitely need to talk about methodologies and frameworks that we have developed and maintained to make sure that security is, again, not an afterthought. It's built in by default. And also make sure that security is approached kind of in a more scientific way instead of just being looked at as an art. So in AMPS services, we developed, first of all, a taxonomy for security to make sure that we talk the same language when we talk security to our customers. We call that our enterprise security reference model. And then on top of the enterprise security reference model, we developed and maintain different security solution reference architectures. These reference architectures, they also are following a certain methodology that is kind of TOGAF based. It's derived from TOGAF. And the good thing about this architectural framework is that it takes into account the cyber needs of the different stakeholders in an organization, starting from the business level all the way to the people that are operating day-to-day your environment. And also a very important aspect of this methodology is that it makes sure that everything you do in security is driven by clear business requirements. So you don't do technology or security technology for technology's sake, for the sake of adding another product. There needs to be a clear business driver. It's kind of a waterfall model that we use, and starting from the business drivers, we translate it into technical requirements, functional requirements, and then implementation requirements. So I think this architectural approach is very important, and through the years we have been developing and maintaining quite a few architectures. We have one for hybrid cloud, for multi-cloud, enterprise IoT. Recently we have been adding one for the AI platform, and our most recent one is a reference architecture for sovereign cloud.
Oh, that's excellent. So I'll switch gears now and going into a little bit more future. So Nigel, no pressure. But because you're part of labs, and part of this team's job is to actually look forward and saying what's emerging from a threat standpoint, what's emerging from a security standpoint. So we can start thinking about the solutions now and start making sure we're incorporating, again, secure by design, and also making sure that the right controls are built so that when those realities happen or when those threats materialize, how is HPE better prepared to handle those? So what's on the horizon that you see, and what are we doing about it?
So we have, so first of all, shameless plug for my own demo. We have, I mentioned we're working on trusted execution environments and confidential computing. So we've got a demo tucked away in a corner, 1005. Love to see you there and talk about that. And if we've got time, maybe we can talk about that as well later on in the panel. But what I'd like to talk about, at least for now, is post-quantum cryptography. So I think most people in the cybersecurity community know that if a suitably powerful quantum computer, known as a cryptographically relevant quantum computer, is developed and becomes available, then that will render many of the cybersecurity primitives, the cryptographic primitives on which our security depends, broken and vulnerable. And now nobody knows when that will be. If you look, and some people say it probably will never happen, but every year the Global Risk Institute conducts a survey, and the most recent survey, which came out in December, 2/3 of the experts they surveyed said that the probability of there being a cryptographically relevant quantum computer was 50% or higher by the end of the next decade, 2039. So in response to this, the US National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, standardized new protocols. And if you look at the recommendations coming from government security agencies around the world, they're pretty much all saying complete migration to these new algorithms by 2035. But if you've got sensitive systems, do it by 2030. So why the urgency? Well, what's, I think, getting most of the press and most of the attention is the so-called Harvest Now, Decrypt Later attack. where the idea is a malicious actor is capturing your messages in the hope that when they get a cryptographically relevant quantum computer, they'll be able to decrypt them. I'm actually concerned with something I think is more fundamental and actually more important to the security of our devices and the security of our customers. And this is the long-lived, long-living keys that are in many of the components that are inside our switches, our servers, our storage arrays. So the keys that are fused into the silicon that are used to verify firmware updates. And as I mentioned, firmware that's the dozen or so firmware modules that get loaded, for example, in a server. If an attacker is able to inject malicious firmware because they have signed it and they have a quantum computer and they've been able to recover the RSA private key that's been used to sign the firmware, that gives them a very low-level, persistent attack, potentially enabling them to spy on you, exfiltrate the data. So when you think, because these can't be updated in the field, and we know that our servers and our switches and our storage arrays on average have a 5-year life, some of them will be in operation longer than that, 7, 8 years. So think of a server that we make in 2028. There's a good chance that some of those servers that we make in 2028 will still be in service in 2035. And you can't discount that a cryptographically relevant quantum computer might not be available then. We have to be cautious, even if you think it probably isn't going to happen. So we're working hard to get all the components to adopt these quantum-resistant algorithms. So we're off to a great start with ILO, the ILO 7, which Antonio, if you were in his keynote, said that ILO 7 has the quantum-resistant LMS algorithm, and that is the root of trust for our Reliant servers. But we've got to work with the processor manufacturers, the manufacturers of storage controllers and network controllers. All of these devices are running firmware. They all need to be migrated and updated to be using quantum-resistant algorithms so that when we get into the 2030s, we have our devices are secure against the quantum computer.
Yeah, excellent. So, Alex?
Yes, just continuing on that thought, if you think about it, today, all the data in all the storage systems is usually encrypted on drives. Most of the drives today have a capability, it's called DARE, data at rest encryption. The keys are in the silicon. And that means that if someone steals the drive, we just trash the key today and we're good to go. But imagine you have a quantum computer that can break that key. Now suddenly your secure arrays, which is using the key trashing, no longer become secure. That would be problem number one, and I think transitioning into post-quantum cryptography with data at rest encryption will be a significant challenge. You'll essentially have to replace all your drives. That is a big investment. And even bigger investment is that you'll have to re-encrypt all your data, because the data today is encrypted on those drives using current like AES encryption algorithms. Moving to post-quantum cryptography will essentially require re-encrypting data, and given that the world currently has around 175 zettabytes of data available, and again, I don't know how many zeros are in zettabytes, but it sounds like there are a lot of zeros. So we'll have to invest a significant effort into transitioning into this particular post-quantum secure area. So from the data perspective, moving away from maybe silicon-infused keys and transitioning to software-based data at rest encryption, where at least the algorithms can be modified, is one step. But we do need to solve the problem of actually re-encrypting the data to be compliant, and that's a very, very non-trivial proposition from our perspective. We're looking at different options in that space.
Yeah, that's a great point. And if you think about the full picture in what we run our systems on, so obviously data and how we are storing and preventing these kind of future attacks becomes really important. At the same time, network is the nervous system. And so, John, what do we do from a networking standpoint to prepare for and get ready for these futuristic threats, not just quantum cryptography, but other aspects as well that some of what Nigel mentioned and we're working on?
Yeah. Quantum is a huge pain in my rear end right now because it's just hurdles all the way down. Like we think about network protocols and encryption of TLS and IPsec and things like that. That depends on protocols defined by IETF and IEEE. That depends on crypto standards defined by NIST. And so, and you get down into a crypto library and we can fix that. And then Nigel brought up the long-lived keys, the firmware signing keys, the device identity. That depends on a TPM chip. I'm now on the board of the Trusted Computing Group. I think that's your fault. You did that to me.
No good deacons.
And we're waiting to get post-quantum compliant TPMs out to market, which depend then again on HSM vendors to have post-quantum algorithms in order to issue the endorsement keys. So it just keeps on going and going. And the chain of dependencies to do a massive upgrade like this is pretty big. So there's that, and we're in the path of getting all this stuff done, trying to meet the deadlines that at least the U.S. government has set out. Other types of things that are out there, the amount of IoT devices we're seeing on networks now, and I don't know from our own environment, what you see, but I see boxes all over the place, either connected via Wi-Fi, plugged in, and they're useful things. They're occupancy sensors in buildings, and there's security cameras all over, and there's all kinds of various devices. I sit on the review board for DEF CON, the largest hacker conference that I'm going to be back here in a month to do that. So August is my favorite time of year to be in Vegas. But we get all these submissions coming in about IoT vulnerabilities, and we're kind of in the mindset in the review board of these devices are garbage, and we just sort of expect that there's lousy software and lousy security controls. But people bring those into enterprise environments and put them onto enterprise networks. And so now, if you combine sort of somebody, I don't know if you remember the Mirai botnet that was taking over all kinds of access cameras, I think. I can't remember which brand of camera it was, but they basically turned it into a DDoS botnet. That sort of thing happening on our corporate networks is a huge concern. And the network is a good place to kind of find those things, stop them, apply those zero trust principles to it. But it's got to be automated because there's so much of this coming in that if your team had to individually approve each class of IoT device that comes into you'd be doomed. You can't hire enough people to do that. So we're working a lot as another sort of advanced threat of how do we identify those things automatically? How do we put them into the right roles to give them the right privileges on the network so that if they do get attacked and compromised, they don't impact the rest of the organization. With that, we're actually able to help our customers on the post-quantum issue, just flipping back to that. One of the problems is knowing where all of your crypto is being done. And so we think the network provides a good observation point to be able to say, I see TLS signatures over here coming from this device that are not post-quantum compliant. We can kind of build that into a database and in the end show you a report and say, here's all the stuff in your network that is ready for 2035 or whatever the date is we're going to pick, and here's what's not. So we're working on that one as well and trying to make that hardware assisted.
And the good news is within HP, we will try it all, right? Because we want to see that it works within our own complex environment, so you all can utilize as well.
Yeah.
So Jan, what are you hearing from customers about what are they worrying the most about besides what we're working on?
Well, I think I want to bring it back again to the architectural level. So I think I'm a big fan of the octopus model. I'm looking at the animal kingdom now. So an octopus, I don't know if you know it, it's one of the most intelligent invertebrates on the planet, and the reason is that it has a pretty big central brain, but it also has different neurons in its tentacles, and those neurons and the central brain they work together And by doing that, an octopus can adapt very quickly and swiftly to the changing threats on the sea. So I think similarly we need to I come to this what I call centralized, decentralized security model. Gartner refers to it as the cybersecurity mesh, where you have different brains working together to make your overall security posture much more flexible, much more agile, allowing to adapt very quickly to threats, but also to your changing business requirements. And I think that also brings us to AI, right? The promise of AI, the more intelligence, the more brains you have, the more those brains work together and collaborate, the stronger your overall security posture can become. And in that context, I think it's important to make sure that if you build new security tools, if you add new security controls, make sure that they are open, that they are using open security protocols to exchange information. So yeah, I think that's a big promise. And yeah, I think with all the things happening in AI, I also think about agentic AI. I think that will help a lot there. It's a bit orthogonal, I think, to what's happening in the world for the moment, because everybody is more on his own. It's not really about collaboration anymore. But I think in security, we should try to do that.
That's wonderful. So before we close, I'm letting you right now that you all four of you have to come up with one thing you want the audience to take away. But you have time to think, because we'll go to Q&A. We'll see what questions we have in the audience, and then we'll end with that, all right? Okay. Sounds like a deal. All right. Questions from the audience. This is a good time to ask, because we've got really talented people here on the stage.
I'm going to start you off with one. I realize I'm not allowed to do that as a panelist, but we talked about the CSED Secure by Design pledge. Does that factor into your purchasing decisions? Are you kind of saying, I'm not going to buy IT products unless the vendor has signed up for that?
It depends right now, because, as Nigel mentioned, there's not as many organizations that have signed up for it. What that tends to do in that case is we have to do other due diligence, and that's an overhead. Yep. So to your point, yes, I would give preference to someone who signed it, because that reduces overhead on our side to ensure, are there other mitigating controls, are there other aspects that we have to spend on. So if someone who's signed it, like HPE, it definitely raises the bar and less overhead for me as a CISO for an organization. This is a reverse panelist.
Well, sorry. Give me a microphone.
So we got a couple of microphones. All right.
All right. Sit down. Hey, as security professionals, we are all worried about various things. I want each panelist to kind of share, what's your biggest worry? What keeps you awake? The top of your list. Could be security or otherwise.
We'll start with the other end. Yeah.
I think, the two big problems I see still today is that organizations, they over-focus on technology when it comes to securing their environments. They forget the people and the process aspects. And the other big problem I think I see is that a lot of organizations, they still don't know where their valuable data is and how it is secured. So I think knowing what you have, how it is protected, that's also, I think, a very important problem still. And that's basically where it all starts, right? Because it's basically the start of a risk assessment. So that's what would keep me awake at night. Yeah.
Okay. Alex, you want to go next?
Yeah, so echoing Jan's concern, most of the breaks and challenges happen by the people who actually have access. That is a very, very fundamental problem. So making sure that people who do have access are subject to the same restrictions, controls, audits, that's the verified part. It's crucially important because sometimes there's a tendency to make shortcuts and allowances, for example, when troubleshooting a particular problem in the field. So making sure that it doesn't happen is a crucial issue. That would be my number one worry. Number two is some of the technology changes, and I have to circle back because technology is an important aspect of storage. We're coming to the very interesting world where more and more encryption happens on the data, and coupled with some of the challenges such as ransomware infection, and ransomware combat tools, it's becoming more and more difficult to distinguish what's called good encryption from bad encryption. If you have your encrypted data from the host and then it gets attacked by ransomware, it is still encrypted. So how are you able to combat those emerging ransomware threats that are very, very difficult to combat in a normal environment with the emergence of the post-quantum cryptography world, and in a case where you actually expect stuff to be encrypted? So distinguishing between properly encrypted data, properly formed data, and badly formed data or badly encrypted data. By badly, I don't mean it's bad encryption, I mean it was done by a bad actor, is a very important topic for us. There's a lot of research in the industry in that space. We're nowhere near where we need to be in that space, and those attacks are growing.
Nigel?
So I worry about two things. One is the ever-increasing size of the attack surface. Systems are becoming ever more complex. Software stacks are becoming ever more complex. We talked about trust and verify. Just the problem with verifying the complex, large software stacks is very difficult. So that's what I think there are some potential technologies that may help with that. So running containers in trusted execution environments or small virtual machines in trusted execution environments might help. So that's one worry, just the sheer ever burgeoning complexity, which actually mitigates against security, just gives attackers so much to attack. And then the second one is coming back to post-quantum cryptography. I'm not convinced that everybody in the industry on which we depend, because this is HPE cannot do it on its own, that they're actually applying sufficient urgency to updating all the devices, and we need to. It's a collaborative effort. John talked about the need for standards. We do need standards. We don't have, for example, in the trusted computing group, don't even have an API for the TPMs to support the new algorithms. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to move the industry to actually having quantum secure devices that are quantum secure at the lowest level. And we need to really start to move on that.
John?
We have so many things I'm worried about. I think we need to meet at the bar, and it's a bit early for me to go on. I guess the ones that would bubble up to the top, skill set of the workforce is one of the things that worries me a lot. And I kind of mentioned it on developers already, of trying to get those people, the security practitioners that kind of work in the CISO shops of our customers. The skill sets are quite varied, and I end up depressed by a lot of them, because we get sent these ridiculous security questionnaires, and I get why. I understand it. I don't like it, but I don't think the people that are asking the questions have any understanding of what they're asking. I don't think that they have the skill set to understand the response, and we can't really have an intelligent conversation about it. The best interaction for me with a potential customer is when the CISO of the customer sits down with me for 30 minutes and we have a conversation back and forth about how do you protect your organization, how do you protect the products that you're trying to sell to me, and we solve a lot that way, but there's only so many of those people with that level of knowledge and skill, and I worry about what we're doing to kind of train and bring the knowledge level up to others, because it is getting more and more difficult. And if I look at something like our cloud stack, Aruba Central is the main cloud application. So many pieces of software in there that are brought in, both software that we create, software that's third party, software from cloud providers. It's just an immensely complicated piece of work to try to keep all of that secure, and it's tough to find people that can grasp all of that and kind of do those things. I think from a security practitioner side, I worry most about the stuff that I don't know about. I think most of the sort of emergency phone calls that I've gotten of, hey, we've got an incident, came from some place that we didn't even know existed. And I think it's worse for us. We work in a high-tech company, and so we have a workforce that just says, oh, there's an Ethernet port. I plug anything I want into that. I don't need to ask anybody, just do it. And most of the time it works. And so I get phone calls like, oh, you've got Bitcoin mining running in one of your test and development labs. I'm like, okay. So the stuff that we don't know about and can't control is something that I worry about a lot. I could go on, but.
Yeah, I think a lot of what everyone's sharing, it actually ties back to two very important things. One, are we doing the basics right a lot of times? Right? Because if you're not doing the basics right, the threat could actually be significantly more in those situations. The second thing is, how do you strike the balance? Right? You have to innovate, you have to produce the outcomes, you have to actually go to market while at the same time making sure you're embedding security. So striking the balance between multiple different aspects, the part I just mentioned, then the discussion we had earlier about prevention versus detection. So there's a lot of risk decisions you have to make day per day per day. That's what, you don't ever know where the right line is, and sometimes you have to test and take the risk and actually make decisions to continue to move on. Okay, any other questions from the audience before we close? All right, please go ahead, sir.
One of the mandates for any of the security guys is to do the data protection. Now, today in enterprises, most of the employees start uploading huge gigabits of data on these generative AI, open AIs, and all those. So that mandate itself seems to be lost. Like, you are trying to protect the enterprise through various softwares, zero trust architecture, but your employees are going and trusting these AI engines, just uploading everything, like what you want to protect, it's already there. So what's your take on that? Means, I'm not saying you can prevent it, but what's your take on that? Maybe any one of you can.
I bet you have a lot to say about this right now.
Oh boy.
Yes.
All right, so maybe I should have included this one in what can make me be up at night. I think this is actually a great example of my last point about balance.
Yes.
Right? You want people to be able to test, experiment, improve productivity, make sure we're able to deliver better outcomes and results. There are, fortunately, solutions available from a DLP standpoint, CASB standpoint. Again, tuned right, implemented right, they can actually achieve significant advantage. I don't think there's a perfect solution, unfortunately. This goes back to the point made earlier, is our workforce aware? And to John's point, whether it's developers or whether it's just someone in marketing or someone in sales, not everyone's thinking about security day in, day out. So when they're doing it because they think they can get a better result by using some XYZ engine out there. So we have to constantly be monitoring, implementing right technology, educating people, implementing right processes. Unfortunately, if I could tell you there's a silver bullet for something like this, there isn't. You have to focus on this holistic approach on improving all these different factors, at the same time allowing the organization to be innovative.
I would answer also by saying, make sure that as an IT and a cybersecurity organization, you're enabling people to make it easy for them to do the right thing, right? And so, example on the generative AI, inside of HPE, we very early rolled out something we call Chat HPE, and it's really just a private instance of ChatGPT, but it scratches the itch for a whole lot of people in the company when they say, this is automatically approved. You can put anything you want into this, and it's within company policy. Add to that the warning banner that you get in your browser when you try to go to one that's not Chat HPE. It doesn't stop you from using it, but it says, by the way, the right thing to do is generally use this thing over here. And same thing we've done with GitHub Copilot. We've got a decent AI governance process in the company where when people want to do things, we kind of, if it's experimental, great, go forth. Very little rules on that. If you're going to put customer data on it, the process is much larger. And I think that that's worked well. But the key point I'm making is make it easy to do the right thing, as opposed to kind of throwing up rules that says, here's all the things you can't do. And you get a lot better outcomes.
Yeah. Alex, you want to add something?
Yeah, exactly. So restrict, educate, enable. I mean, those are the three pillars. You have to provide all three. Otherwise, people will find very, very creative ways to violate your restrictions. So, for example, again, from storage perspective, we are doing a lot of work in ransomware research. And in order to do work in ransomware research, you need to have an environment where real ransomware is available for your developers to test. And guess what? Real ransomware really shows up on all the security scanners. And then the security scanners just block your developer's way of doing the work, so they will move somewhere else. They will violate all the security rules because they need to get their work done. So thankfully, we have a sandbox lab that was created by HP IT for us to be able to do our research. So enabling is a big part of making sure that people don't violate your restrictions.
Great examples, both of you. Thank you. I know we have very little time, probably time for only one more question if there is any in the audience. It's a little bit dark from here. All right, I think we're good. All right, so back to, I gave you the warning. What's one takeaway, or maybe two, just in short, that each of you would like to share? John, starts with you, this side.
I forgot to think about the answer, but
we can go to Nigel. That's
no,
okay.
I'm gonna put my vendor hat on for a second, because obviously I work for a vendor. Alex said Zero Trust has a cost to it, and I think the amount of effort that we're spending to make our products secure comes with a cost as well. And I'm disappointed when we get into these competitive battles, and not to name names, but in the SD-WAN space that we compete in, there's a vendor that has a critical CVE probably every 2 weeks. It's well known. We get into the switching game, and we compete with a vendor that's out of a country that sort of has known central party fingers into all of these different IT products. But hey, the product is super cheap. And I see people make those sorts of purchase decisions. And so my takeaway that I would like everyone to take away is think about when you take an IT product and you put it into your environment, what sort of risk are you bringing in, and what's the reputation of the company that you're buying from? So that's my selfish vendor plug for ourselves. Sorry.
So I'm kind of going back to PQC again, because the migration is complex. And for your most sensitive critical systems, you really need to start getting plans in place. Cryptography is everywhere. We will take care of the basics on the platform, but the software stacks, there's crypto all over that. So understanding what your exposure is on the critical systems, creating an inventory of it, and understanding how you're going to upgrade it, I think, is something that you need to do if you want to stay secure. You want to be prudent with against the threat of a quantum computer. And there is already software out there that you can use. So some web servers now, like Nginx and the Chrome web browser, are starting to support these algorithms. OpenSSL has these algorithms in it now as well too.
Thanks, Nigel. Alex?
Yeah, so basically two takeaways for me. I have to agree, happily agree with Nigel. So first of all, the threat is real. The fact that we haven't seen a single quantum computer public yet doesn't mean that they don't exist, or they won't exist 5 to 10 years from now. So basically saying, this is just science fiction will not go well. That's point number one. Point number two, post-quantum cryptography is not about patching your OS or replacing your network card or doing some other patchwork exercise. It's an end-to-end solution. You need to look at your system as a whole, and there are lots of moving parts. Let you in on a secret. There are way more moving parts than most people think, and you need to start early.
Great point. Jan?
Yeah, I think I'm going to echo what Nigel said and all members on the panel. So it's all about knowing where your data is, how your data is protected, what crypto algorithms are you using to protect your data, to encrypt them. So I think that's the start of everything. If you get that right, I think you have a much better cybersecurity protection.
That's wonderful. All right, well, thank you all, audience. Thank you all for being here. This was a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it. Learned a lot. Hopefully, same for everyone here as well. Thanks for joining us, and great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.